Welcome to the Blue Swan. Today we have Nathalie Bonin. She is a Grammy-winning musician, violinist, and aerial trickster. And so on that on that note, would you mind just telling us anything you'd like?
Oh, wow. Well, I think we've got almost an hour possibly to try and go through my life, but I'm a violinist composer and I am very much into science and wellness. And I used to be a pre-med student, so it's kind of now coming back full circle into this new project that I'm leading. So, yeah, excited to talk more about it.
Thanks. And so the artistic journey and the entrepreneurial one as well is something that it's sometimes easy to stop believing in. And so I'm wondering if you would discuss a little bit about the transition from um, LA from Montreal, and then including winning SOCAN's Composer of the Year award in 2023 while living in Los Angeles. And so what your soul told you and how you kind of got to where you are.
Hmm. I actually love that story because I think that was something that taught me a lot. I was actually at a point in my life in 2015, so it's just a bit over 10 years now, where on a personal note, I was divorcing or on my way to divorce and figuring out my life with my 15-year-old. Also, with the goal of expanding my career, wanted to do different things. I had been touring a lot as a musician, starting to compose and have some themes here and there, but I felt a little restricted where I was in Montreal. So I felt it was time to move forward and explore. And I had already booked a trip to the American film market that was happening in November 2015. And we had just decided to separate 2 weeks before. So, in the midst of finding a new house, figuring out the school for my kid, I went to this conference and overwhelmed by the networking activities, which I knew nothing about in LA. That was totally different from my Canadian upbringing in Montreal. I felt a little bit, I guess, some anxiety pump up, and I went to the beach and I sat down and I was just waiting for something to come. I didn't know. I felt a bit lost about everything. And this inner voice came and just said, "You're going to move here." And I literally remember going, "What? What? What are you telling me?" And I kept asking, "Are you sure?" Yep. I knew nobody. I didn't really have any contacts. I was told to go there to expand. And it was so profound. It was so intense that I felt I had to listen. And I sat there for at least an hour and decided to make my 3 year plan right there on the beach, deciding to buy my house from that hotel at Casa del Mar. I'll never forget. While I was planning this 3 year plan, thinking my son's going to be 18, he'll have a choice. And sure enough, 3 years later, I had my apartment, my car in LA, and my son was visiting and later on did his own path as an actor at the New York Film Academy and ended up having the green card. So it kind of all worked out because I decided to follow this crazy voice at the time that led me to part of my destiny. Yeah. I know you mentioned something about the SOCAN Awards, and so I'm going to touch on that. Um, and that leads into the rest of it. So while I was coming here for 3 years, my plan was to grow my network. I was thinking it's a smart move, right? I have 3 years to do this, so I'm not completely diving in a potentially empty pool. And as I was coming back for festivals, for workshops, for mentorships, I was always thinking, let me do every assignment in these mentorships as if I had to compose for the next major screening, major movie. And with that kind of mindset, my mentors noticed me and started connecting me with people. And that's how I actually landed my first Hallmark movie, which led to five, and then which led to a documentary that won a Grammy Award for the soundtrack, including me, obviously, and the team. And because of all of that, I got recognition um, from the SOCAN and got the SOCAN Award of the Year. So, all of that would not have happened if I did not follow that voice on the beach that day. It's really amazing when you think about it.
Congratulations, and thank you for sharing that taste of light in the dark. Um, and so, can you talk a little bit about the flow state and sort of what it does for artists? You know, did it help you create a wheel of playlists? And did you
Mhm.
feel that when you were on the beach?
I think that there's some moments in life that you get to a flow state by necessity. I think that there's, when you hit certain bottoms in your life where you're completely lost, you feel like you let go of a lot of things because you can't even carry the weight of them anymore. And I feel like a lot of times we get in the way of our own wisdom by trying to carry everything. Because you're in that state, in those moments, it just feels like you let go and you make space for these whispers and these voices to help you and guide you. And I think that the flow state is the same. I was just at the screening um, with Diane Warren and listening, watching her story. She seems to be in a continuous flow state. She has achieved this kind of river of flow that she taps into and has a hard time getting out of it. She doesn't like to be out of it. And that's great because you can get addicted to that. It's an amazing space to tap in because you lose space, time. Well, sometimes you forget to eat, that's not great, but or sleep. But that's when you can create the most profound art and music. In my case, my best music is when I'm in that incredible flow state or when I perform and I forget that I forget about the nervousness of the ego. I don't want to forget about the audience because I want to give them something. So it's not, oh, I'm not thinking of you. It's being in the flow, is being in the moment, being present and feeling that conversation with whatever is going on, which is creation, performance, dialogue. That's for me, that's the flow state. It's the best state ever.
Cool. And so, like you can hear these variations within rhythm throughout, your violin tracks. And so, I'm wondering if you can discuss a little bit about the recording of Aspirations at Abbey Road
Mm.
2.
Right. That was a very, very personal album. It came out after a very bad car accident where I could have died. And I feel like the inspiration from the album, without me really knowing or being aware that it came from that album, after the fact, I realized how it impacted my writing, which was so unique for that album. And when I listened to it, and people have told me that even before I told them, there's this continuous motor, like will to live, will to move on, will to not get discouraged. And that accident was that. It was such a hard stop, literally, a divider in heavy metal is pretty hard. Um, and it was such a symbolic thing because it was a divider. And I did feel very divided at that time. So it was a lesson. And I think in my music of that album, I feel the will to unite and the will to move on continuously. This motor on every track, there's something that keeps churning and never giving up. The resilience, but the force to move forward. And of course, recording at Abbey Road was just fantastic. It was a big bucket list. It was one of those things that you only dream of, and it was served on a silver platter. I think, again, maybe my soul called it, but through my first mentor in LA, Michael Levine and his wife, they connected with this label, Audio Network, and they felt I was a great fit for them. So they introduced us at a dinner. They started listening, Audio Network started listening to my music, and they were like, yes, we would love for you to do an album, feature yourself as violinist and with some strings and a few more instruments and record at Abbey Road. I'm like, yes, of course, And so it was a total dream come true. It was fantastic. I think my jaw dropped for about half an hour when I was just walking in. It was just amazing. Yeah. And I actually realized after I do believe that I haven't found anything else. I do believe I'm the first French Canadian composer who has composed and performed and recorded at that studio from Montreal. So kind of a little local proud moment there.
Congrats. You
Thank
have
you.
you have a very, very long list of accomplishments, and it's quite heartwarming to kind of see the transition when you discussed, the car accident. And I'm glad you're okay, but you light up when you start discussing everything at Abbey Road too. And so it's really cool to see the joy in your face. And so
Thank you.
anytime. And so, speaking of something like so heartwarming, can you discuss a little bit about how your career came full circle with the phase 2 biometric study you're doing with Stanford and how that has combined, all of these aspects of your persona from Qigong or yoga or meditation to pre-med and composing music. You've integrated all of that into something that
Mhm.
is really phenomenal.
Great. First of all, I just want to make a tiny correction. I did not connect directly with Stanford. So Stanford is mostly connected with certain developers that I have been collaborating with, but it's a separate thing. I don't have a research program with them, just to make sure that's cleared. So I don't know if you want to rephrase that or if you because
I
that
don't
might be
think it
confusing.
I
Up
don't
to
think
you. You
nobody's
can
going to
adjust.
take it personally. I
Okay,
mean,
it's okay. So it's all good. So I what led to all of this is kind of funny. Well, it's not funny, but recently, I think everybody has felt that the past 5 years have been very destabilizing for most people. There's been a lot going on in the world, and it seems personally as well as this weird cycle that's supposedly ending. We're so happy with about that, and I feel like that time where I had a lot of grief. My dad's wife passed literally in my arm last year. My mom going through dementia and Alzheimer, and a lot of responsibilities that were falling on me got me to reflect and think, okay, this is who I am now in my life. I've done all of these things, and now as a human, I am feeling all these emotions, the grief, the loss, and now that I want to move forward with, I would say, the second half of my life, why do I still want to do music? Why do I create? Why do I perform? What's the purpose behind all of this? And I was kind of dumbfounded. I was thinking, I don't know. Like, why am I doing it? For months, I was writing, trying to understand because I feel like I've been such a high performer, continuously trying to get the next gig, do the next contract, perform at my best. And it was performance required by whoever, whatever. But I was missing my own real purpose inside, which I think I got glimpses here and there, but I couldn't formulate it. And when I looked back on my life through these exercises, I realized, well, I was a total nerd when I was a kid. I learned English practically by learning to program and how computer worked. And then I was fascinated by the stars, then the medicine and all of that science, up to the point that I even got a pre-med and was accepted to med school and had to decide, ended up staying in music, but kept going on that. This whole martial arts wellness, I love languages. And it just felt like, well, why am I doing this? I want to connect. There's always a connection with all of this. There's always a an intention to find your soul. So whether it's for healing, whether it's through art creation, I was finally seeing that all the pieces in my life, all the chapters that I had done made sense because now I could combine them. Now I could see using the new technology, which wasn't available before. We now have ways to connect with our audiences naturally, just tapping into the reaction. We have ways to capture eyesight or expressions or movement. And now it's not just a passive audience. We can actually together create an experience. And that kind of blew my mind. I was like, that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I know there's a power with the art. It brings calm, it brings, it even it trains our brain, it brings us in a parasympathetic state, which is like the flow state basically, kind of, close to that. So I felt like finally I found a direction that is meaningful. And I had been working on this for over 5 years now, attempting different things, having a lot of scenarios of what to do within immersive um, venues, using various technologies. I did a few concept, writing, a few grants here and there. And then it just felt like I was getting ahead of what I think what I felt technology was at. And even people said you might have to wait because it's not there yet. So last year, everything started to mesh. And there was the first opportunity where I was able to demonstrate the concept at Infinity Fest, actually at the end of 2024, which was that concept of connecting the audience through their own EEG signal and seeing how that could look on a stage while I perform. And for me, that was like the spark of that new phase, that real phase of doing it for real, not just thinking about it for 3 years. And that led to the biometric study one with Chowdu and Robert Bahidri, where I integrated some wellness into that with breath work and went to the next level of bringing back that pre-med, in me. And with Chow being an artist, now we opened up to visual art, not just music. So it was kind of a larger scope. And this first study was so powerful. I just saw the participants being so eager to understand how their bodies were reacting that it led to phase two. So I think that it's just the whole background of my life finally making sense.
And so just to touch on how this may or may not overlap with the biometric study that you're doing, like if you check out, some of the footage, there are people meditating to music and in a space on, the shore of Santa Monica. And so um, sort of how does that overlap with everything from your life experiences to any
Mhm.
recording studios you've worked with? And
It's kind of interesting because at that time that I was creating, producing, and recording the album with Radhika, I was already on that path of figuring out the puzzle pieces coming together from my pre-med science and all of that. And to have this album that for some people might say it tickles new age in a little bit, because of the style that we created, even though it's not synth, it's not what we think about new age, but it has a vibe of healing that you can hear through it, right? So my project of the biometric study was ongoing while I was doing that album, and it felt very, you know, in sync. It was a lot of synchronicity happened, and as I was doing more research on how music heals frequencies and all the while working with Radhika that uses Sanskrit, which is known as the healing languages because it has the frequencies within the language are known to heal. And so it's just a really cool parallel to be going on those two paths. And like I said before, the first phase we were just exploring with devices that people brought in. So we had maybe 15 participants wearing Apple Watches, Oura rings, and going through music and breath work and sound bath, meditation and movement. And it was already fascinating to see certain signals, how they affected the biometric data that we were looking at afterwards. And it was just evident that there was specific spikes or responses to certain experiments and certain parts of them. So it led to me on thinking I need to find a way to get a uniform baseline with the same equipment. And that's what I wanted to do with the biometric study phase two, which is why I got introduced to Dr. Mitch Abrams, who's a radiologist in Toronto, and his wife. They have Next Gen Health, and they had developers come from Boston, and they had these heart straps. So basically, we used that for the phase two, where everybody was wearing the same heart strap. And I also had Emotive, who lent us for equipment for the EEG, comparing some EEG data as well. And again, analyzing these results now, and from the participants also, their comments to the questionnaires and the comments afterwards of how they felt the whole weekend went, it's just so beautiful to see that not only people understand, they know, some of these have been practicing yoga breath work for a lifetime almost, and they know for themselves that it did heal them, but they were never able to show, prove, or see on screen or in a way that was clear to them. And to be able to now connect with the technology, and to be able to see, say, hey, this is your stress level right now. You can see it as you do the experience. It was just really incredible to feel the awe, the curiosity, and the will to go further with this. So I can't wait to see where phase three is going to go. Already have a bunch of ideas and a lot of meetings coming up. And it's great because not only people are ready, they're curious, they want this to work, and we're just gaining more momentum. And I think that's just going to be one of my main projects in my life. I just feel like that might be the most significant project I've ever worked on so far.
So that is fascinating. Do you mind if I ask, like, you mentioned phase three studies, and so
Mhm.
this is like a full-fledged medical device that's being tested and measured, or
Yeah, so right now, um, my goal is to test various devices. I don't want to stick to just one because there's so many biometrics we can explore, from breath, EEG, um, HRV, which is heart rate variability, the heart rate itself, body temperature. There's so many signals, and to see how these signals fluctuate, and how we can not only use them as witnesses of the effects, we can use them creatively. And that's my goal, is to really dive into that, bringing more art through the biometrics, and then bringing more people to experience this, and co-create something together. I have visions. I see where this could lead, but we'll see what happens,
uh,
one step at a time.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Awesome. And so in some of your earlier interviews, you've discussed sort of some of the traditionalism in terms of practicing classical violin. And so
Mhm.
it seemed like you had to kind of recombine some things with some of the original Sanskrit music into more of a neoclassical sound when you were recording at Synchron Stage in Vienna. And
Mhm.
so, what was the process of that like? How did it feel? And anything else you'd like to discuss about that?
Sure. So that came from the same label, as Aspirations. Basically, after that, well, the way it started is when I did that release of the album, I invited Radhika to demonstrate her piece, to perform her piece as a little feature. And she asked me to play with her. And through that playing together, the label was there and they loved what they heard. It was just a spontaneous improvisation on her Sanskrit Vedic inspired songs, and it gave the idea to create this hybrid, world together. So that's how Sacred Echoes birthed. And actually, it was such a nice experience because I've always loved the Vedic wisdom. Having done a lot of yoga myself, I kind of felt like I knew a little bit of it, even though I'm not properly studying it. But and she's really studying in that, so she writing in Sanskrit, and I felt like she was very much rooted in that philosophy, and I was bringing all the Western aspect of the orchestra, the strings, and it was fascinating because I think we both surprised each other during the creative process, where we didn't really have any plan. First of all, we wanted it to flow, and the inspiration had to come in that flow state. We didn't program an album thinking we're going to have, you know, to moving faster pieces. Then, it wasn't a planned out thing. And it was very natural. It was actually pretty fast. We did the full composition and the demos within, I think, 6, 7 weeks. It was just very concentrated, pitching back and forth ideas, adjusting them. And it felt like if I was sending her my idea, I didn't know what she was going to do with it. And it was so amazing, such an amazing surprise when I got her to add on her part to it. And it just took on a whole new dimension, and vice versa. For her, it was like, oh my God, the whole orchestra showed up. And so it was a beautiful gift to do that together. Yeah.
So how did it feel to record at these studios where they recorded Mission Impossible?
Oh, it was just incredible. I mean, first of all, it was my first time in Vienna, and it was just wonderful to be in that city of culture and classical music, and to get to actually do this album with Radhika Sacred Echoes there, combining the classical with the Indian traditions, and to have that gorgeous, beautiful studio. It's just such an amazing space. The sound and the musicians were just fantastic. They just really understood. We told them what it was about and what it meant to us, and they really put their hearts into it. It was just really beautiful process. The producers from the album were online looking in from London. We were there in the control room. That really looks like you're in Star Trek or something. It looks like you're flying a ship, and it was just a beautiful experience. Yeah.
You've released a lot of good work within the past 5 or so years, in spite of that being a somewhat tumultuous period for the entertainment industry in Los Angeles. And so it was one of the hallmark tracks you landed was Prestigious Emblem for Bridgerton. Is that right?
Yes, that was actually for the trailer to season 3, and yeah, that came about in a way that's, one of those things that the universe sends you, and if you follow it, you end up getting something. I remember that I went to this party with Erin Collins, who is taking care of my CSAC royalties, and as I went to this event, I sat at a table with these two executives. They asked me to get in a meeting, wanting to learn more about my music. Ended up doing that meeting in Hollywood on this, high top floor meeting there. So it was very, very Hollywood. And then they said, I think you should meet this person. He'd be total fit for you as a, co-composer. And that's how I met Simone Benyakar. So we actually co-worked on this piece on a full album that's called Taste of Light. And that's how we actually got the first piece. And the first sync was for Bridgerton. The funny thing about it is when we started the album, we specifically said, let's do something for Bridgerton. And that's the first sync we get. So we totally pitched it to the universe and it worked. Yeah.
Awesome. And so slightly before that, you did some graduate work at Berklee School of Music. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if anything you learned or picked up during that time influenced the Grammy you won for Women Warriors Voices of Change.
My time well, first of all, I did all of that online, which was my first experience studying online, Berklee Online. And I was on tour. So it was really quite an adventure at first, doing all of this work on tour. Literally, my first class, I was in Siberia from Krasnoyarsk. And I had that meeting with the class, and I was showing them the room because I was playing there in this big, gorgeous hall in Krasnoyarsk, like a gulag town. And all the students were like, wow. Anyway, so I was learning, I think it was band arrangements for band. I think that was my first arranging class. And then I loved it so much. I did it mostly on tour at first, that as I moved on, I was very curious about this course about scoring for, the screen, for TV, for movies. And so I took the course. I didn't know anything about Logic or DAWs or how to program music really, and or to notate music. So it said that I was supposed to know how to do that, take the course. I said, I'll figure it out. And so I did that, essentially figuring out the tools as I went along. And that's how I got started in film scoring. And it definitely influenced because it made it possible. So that's the biggest influence, is making those dreams possible, right? I don't know if it influenced stylistically, maybe because Ben Newman was my main teacher, and it was such a great time. And now it's great because he was my teacher for 4 classes and lives close to LA, and he has followed a bit about my career and ended up inserting 2 of my pieces in his scores, including those by Women Warriors. So, I mean, not in his scores, but in classes. So, as examples for his students. So now I hear some students contact me, say, "Hey, I'm in the class, and it's your piece." And anyway, so it's nice to feel that I've been part of that community. I feel Berkeley has helped me a lot. It's really an amazing world community. And again, I think the most that it's done, it's just helped me realize one of my dreams.
Thanks. And so this must have been maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but how did you develop the aerial violin act where you're flipping around in the air and your posture is solid. I mean, like you maintain very, very, very good form, and that's difficult to do, especially like while maintaining the hand-eye coordination for playing the violin.
Yeah, I can tell you know what you're talking about, actually. And yes, it is very hard. I did have a background in yoga, martial arts, dance, and that definitely helped. What started all of that is because when I was a very small kid, prior to music, so starting at 3 years old, I did gymnastics up until almost 10. So all those years, my main passion was actually gymnastics. That's what I wanted to be, like Nadia Comaneci. Like that was my idol. And it didn't turn out that way because when I filled out the application to go to the next level of gymnastics, the provincial level, they did not accept people with my height and weight. And I just didn't fit the mold at the time. And I had to give up that dream, which was very painful. I remember those days when I was 9 very vividly. And I think that just stayed in my mind. I love, physical activity. I love fitness. I love all exploring dance and martial arts and all of that. So at one point, I was working on this musical with this choreographer who's done a lot with Cirque du Soleil. And I told her, make me do something fun. All these dancers are having all the fun. I'm just playing violin. Like they could lift me. They could, I don't know, like let's try something. And so we did. It wasn't planned in the musical at all, but I kind of changed it. I asked her, and now I was spinning around. They were like lifting, and I was playing, and it was challenging, but standing on their shoulders. And I'm like, this is fun. So next, after I said, so how about if I would do this in the air? You're in the circus. So who can help me do that? And she said, I think I know somebody. So she connected me with Marcus, and I called him at least 3 times before he answered back because I'm sure he thought I was totally crazy. And that's how I started training. The training was grueling because, as you can imagine, I'm playing the violin. So it's not like aerial art where you can pull yourself up. I don't have my hands. I'm playing. And I didn't want to stop playing. So I had to figure out a way. And the only way we could figure out was the harness, where becoming the motor was basically the legs and the abs. So my abs were killing me for 6 months. I couldn't laugh. It was just so painful
Oh,
because you can't imagine playing and doing the plank on your back and trying to hold your legs straight and stay there. And that was most of my training because until I could do that, I couldn't really have the form to do the full, number. And 6 months after my initial training, I had actually my premiere on live TV. Just kind of a go for it moment. It was just so how to say exhilarating. Yeah, it was just amazing.
Yeah, that it's like holding a human flag or a dragon flag while playing the violin. I don't know if you're familiar with those exercises, but yeah,
I
that
don't. I'm curious. You have to
you're
send me those links.
I absolutely will. They're incredibly challenging, and yeah, it was truly something else. And so entertainment is actually it's been changing rapidly. A lot of that is AI, but that's started
Mhm.
happening, back in 2023 before a lot of the LLMs came out. And so I'm wondering kind of what you see happening and then also how you feel about the entertainment industry as some of it shifts to somewhat of a numbers game and what you think that does to passion for the art and
Mhm.
how it's going to continue.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, there's so many discussions about it. There's more and more people trying to make friends with it, I think, and use it to create something beyond human and kind of saying, well, if you can't beat it, join it, kind of vibe. And I understand that because I think that there is value in it. There's a lot that we can explore. There's also the risk of losing our own humanity and the soul. So I think there's a balance to be found and to remember that AI is not a soul. AI is amazing at doing what it does, but it can't replace a soul. And you can feel it. Although I kind of feel like there was already a lot of, I'm going to say, mush and noise starting to happen even before AI. And I feel like the AI is kind of clearing that state a little bit. It's not making it easy for the real artist because all of the noise combined dilute the pools and make it even harder for us artists to make a living because if you have all these tracks coming in the pool and if the Spotify's and Apple of this world don't detect and decide to move them out of the pool, that means that they're diluting the residuals, which are already ridiculously low. So it just feels like the model of streaming is not a viable model anymore. Whether you're trying to place syncs on Netflix or any of these, or you're producing your albums and distributing them on these streaming platforms, unless you're like top pop stars in major pop styles, there's almost no chance that you're going to make a living out of it. So it forces us to either be a little bit rebellious and find other ways being independent because if you sell one album you sell it $20, you would have to have millions of listens before you get that. I mean, it's crazy the amount of streaming you need. So it forces us to think of other models. And I think that on the other spectrum, there's also film, movie, the way people go out. They don't go to the movies as much, because they've been, I guess, used to being at home in their pajamas, just watching Netflix or just chilling. And they don't feel the urge to say, oh, I'm going to go out. I'm going to pay for parking. I'm going to, why do I do this? I can just rest at home. And there's so much content available. I think that we're at a phase where we need to connect with ourselves, use our soul's passion, energy, and the what it can create. But we can use the technology and AI to connect it and make it enticing for people to go out. And so I think the new technology blended with true artistry can create a new way to perform, to create experiences, and to have people feel like They're not just sitting there. We're not just feeding them something. They're part of the story. They're part of the creation. And that's very exciting for me. I really think that's the future.
Thanks. And I'm sorry about killing the mood a little bit. I think that it's kind of a touchy subject and
No, it's fine.
okay, thanks.
It's absolutely, we have to talk about it. We can't avoid it. It's part of our lives.
Yeah, but and so what would your solution be? Like I honestly I can see things through the eyes of the tech industry and then not as well through entertainment. And I think that you've done so much in entertainment that I'm just kind of curious to hear about, you know, what you think would benefit the performers in the industry as a whole with the transition.
Well, I think there's a responsibility, and I'm going to place that on people that actually can have an impact. So, people in power, that would be performance organization, like collecting societies. That would be labels, that would be top artists that make already a gazillion amount of money that don't really need to have more right now, but understand that when you want to listen to me on the platform, even if your subscription is $15 for your month, it's as if you're buying the portion of me in the entire Tower Records. You remember Tower Records, what it was? It was like 10 floors of CDs. Back then, you could buy a CD and support your artist, your favorite artist, even if that artist was not known at all. You would pay that artist and the team behind it. Now it's not that. You pay a subscription model that pays the artist a proportion, but essentially paying the rest of the pool, and you get the portion according to your popularity, which makes it crazy. So if they could figure out, and there is a technology for sure to do that, figure out a way that when people listen to your music, your subscription pays only for what you listen to, not the entire pool. That would already benefit so much the artist and help the more independent and the more niche artists like classical, jazz, all of those genres. They're never going to get gazillions of listens. That's just not the way people consume. So I think that's one thing that needs to be remodeled. And I don't know if I see that happening soon. So the other way, like I said, is just to figure out your own way. You create your own path. And that's why social media has been growing. And I've been resisting quite a bit because I honestly despise the word content. I do not associate myself with content. For me, that's anti artistic. I work so much in my life to create my art. I do not create just content. For me, content rhymes as empty a little bit, like consumable, like disposable, trash almost. It has to have a purpose behind. It has to have a message. And you can create content, as they say, that is very powerful. Although right now, I'm thinking of a lot of channels that don't really have that much powerful message, but probably make a lot more money because of the way the system is built. And how many people are making really a lot of money on YouTube right now because they figured out a way to monetize, right? And they just use these snippets of IPs that they have not created themselves. They just know where to pick them, program them, spit them out, and get the views and then get the pay. And it's very smart. I'm not saying that it's not smart, but as an artist, balancing, I'm the creator, I want to promote my thing, then I guess you have to figure out a way to either find your own way or fit in the model that seems to be working and find your piece in that. And I don't have a full solution for you because I think 2025 proved that everybody was still looking for that solution. An example, I went to Billy Idol's screening and he was interviewed. And at the end, the guy basically asked the same question. The interviewer asked him, so what would you give as an advice to somebody that starts and wants to have a career like you did? He's like, today? He's like, I don't have a clue. I don't even know if I could do it today. I don't know. It's that bad that even a person like that has so much force, that has so much talent, wouldn't know where to start. So I don't have the solution for you, but I think there's a lot of people that have certain responsibilities and that should take action to make it more viable for sure.
No, and honestly, it sounds like a lot of people in Los Angeles are banding together and trying to find a solution. And so I think the more people talk about it, the more.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't know if you ever
Yeah,
listened to a band called Little Big, but they have this album called Lobster Pop Star, and there's a
I
picture of
love the
a
names.
yeah,
That's
oh,
awesome.
it's amazing, and
Yeah.
it's got this picture of a lobster with the diamond rings on its fingers, just kind of sitting on a plate on the cover. And I think a lot
Oh,
of
I think I've
lot
seen
of-
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
kind of feel that.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. But it's right. It's so important to talk about it. And I think to educate also the audience. Most people that I've explained what I've just explained to you about how your subscription works and how this is distributed to artists, most people don't realize. They don't realize it. They think, oh, we're doing this and it must go back to the artist. It doesn't really when you know how it works.
yeah, I honestly don't know as much about artistic distribution. I'm much newer to that, and so.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, there's a much higher degree of nuance and more specialized training for anything in the arts, whether it's acting or music,
Mm-hmm.
or anything of this sort, than there is for content creation. And a lot of content creation really falls almost more under marketing. It's about
Right.
volume, views, sort of there's targeting an audience and entertainment, but it's like it comes more from the soul than just running the numbers.
So that's a great example. Basically, what's happening right now is such a transition that the artists have to become their own marketing company as well, which is tough because you're already wearing so many hats and you still have to compose, produce, perform. Like the whole stress of all that doesn't go away, but all of a sudden you also have to churn your content creation, promote on all the social media, figure out all the hashtags and all that goes with that. And it just adds on so much that if you don't have the team or the financial support or the money yourself, you have to basically not sleep. you know, that's basically what it is to maybe make a living because it just forces us into that model. And until you get to a point where you have enough subscribers that then it makes it viable, there's these years and a lot of people just can't last these years. So I think we're all in that shift. We haven't figured it out yet. I certainly don't have the answer to it. We're all testing different things and we're all hopefully believing in our dreams. That's what I'm doing, profoundly believing in it and just focusing. Having a work ethic is just, we can't just sit there and wait. We can't expect it to come. We have to just find something that you're so convinced is worth doing all the work for it and just going forward. There's just no other way.
Thank you for answering that. And to try and close on more of a brighter note, what are your top five favorite artists on Spotify?
Oh my goodness. My top five favorite artists on Spotify. There's so many. And I'm going to be going into a lot of film scoring because that's what I listen to a lot. So I love Nicholas Britell, who's done Moonlight. I love James Horner, which, obviously is just such a, did the original Avatar. Um, I always love Barbara Streisand. I always have a sweet spot for her. Yentl was one of my favorite scores, and I still try to beat her on that last note. Trying to hold that note. I just love that score every time I cry. Um, Aside from that, I love listening to playlists as well. So it's not necessarily artists, but for example, when I take off on a plane, I have to listen to country music. It's kind of the only time I listen to country music. It puts me in a traveling mode. So, you know, like Shelton and all these guys, I just like the mood in the plane for some reason. It has to be in the plane.
Uh,
And aside from that, I'm gonna say another thing I love to listen to is a chakra playlist, which I love to wake up to. So I don't know if that counts, but those are moods, and those are also important because, as we know, it is healing. And so getting those vibrations, I believe for me, because I don't like flying. So that's why I use country music. Somehow it puts me in a mood where I'm okay to take off. I don't know why. And when I'm waking up in the morning, I need a mood to just center me and all of that. So I guess, in that case, they're more playlists than individual.
no, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and I think everything else sounds wonderful. And in terms of country music, I'll hold my peace on country music. Um,
It seems like we could have a whole podcast just on the subject for that reaction.
I mean, so in all honesty, when I played drums in high school and part of middle school, and so I used to talk about how like I love all forms of music. I can't do country for some reason, and so to this day, like 15 years, or so years later, I still don't know why. Um,
It's interesting because I was kind of the same way until I found it on the plane, and I was like, here it's perfect. And I ended up working with on a kind of a Americana, really Americana album in Nashville last year, and it was just really fun to dive into that world and playing fiddle more. And I just find that is just a very warm setting. I think that's whether you like it or not to listen to, there is a vibe about it, and there's, I would say, a culture about it that's really enticing in many ways. So I love being in Nashville and diving into that world a little bit.
have you ever listened to The Offspring? They have obviously an album called Americana back in like the
Hmm.
early to mid 90s.
Yeah, I don't know if I have. I have heard the name, but I will remember to listen for
Okay.
sure. Hmm.
So their lead singer has a PhD in biology, and so I
Oh
figured that it
wow.
might be worth mentioning. Um,
Yeah, thank you for yeah, the Offsprings. I'll check it out for
yeah,
sure.
you have a very, very extensive track record between, like, innumerable awards and recordings at prestigious studios, biometric studies, but you've also performed alongside artists like Stevie Wonder. And so, do you have a second just to discuss your top five favorite performers of all time that you've worked with?
Yeah, well, definitely. You just named probably my number one. I mean, that was just such a highlight. Stevie is an amazing light on stage. He's just so charismatic and joyful when he plays. I think the concert lasted 4 hours. It was just amazing. And so I'm gonna give him the top one spot. I mean, other people that I did tour a lot. I'm gonna name just a few that popped up in my mind. I loved Aznavour because of his style and his songs and his way is a real privilege. La Boheme is just such a classic. Um, Also playing with Wynton Marsalis in New York, I got to solo with the Jazz at Lincoln Center, and he was playing in my band, which was kind of like surreal. And to be part of that was really incredible for me. I got to play with Gino Vanelli, which was so cool because it was part of my high school years of hearing, Wild Horses and to end up doing all these great music. He's a fantastic musician, composer. He's got a bionic ear, I think. And oh my God, there's a lot of people I worked with, but who else? Well, Rick Wakeman, yes, from the band, yes, that was also really exciting. And Pavarotti was another one that I got to perform with, which felt like performing with, a century monument. He was just his aura is so huge. You can just feel his energy. It's just really, really powerful. So I think I gave you more than five, but yeah, that I could probably give you 20, but they're just, I was very, very blessed to be able to perform with all of these people.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Of course, my pleasure.